people walking down the street in the 40s and the 50s in downtown Tucson. I love them. Full body shots of people mid-stride, just walking down the street being who they were. Everyday heroes. A month later, a call to artists came up to put murals at the eastern gateway of downtown Tucson on Broadway, just east of downtown. I applied. I'd never done anything like that before, but I had the idea I needed to make those pictures big. And that's why I was chosen, and you've seen it's been 20 years since we dedicated them. Those murals of the people walking down the street in the 50s, just east of Broadway. I invented a method of putting photos on tile to get that done. I was selected for those murals, and ever since, people don't think about those murals as something some guy did. They think of them as our murals, and that's what success in public art has been. Now, I've been trying to do the same sort of success in public service, serving the people who elect me. And when it comes right down to it, the most important body of government in our city is the neighborhoods. And that's who I'm going to be listening to first, everywhere. And I'm going to neighborhood association meetings all over this town. My campaign chair is Yolanda Herrera, who's the chairperson of the president of the Sunnyside Neighborhood Association and a renowned Southside activist. And that's for a reason, because neighborhoods is who you go to first. We have to protect our history, our culture, and our heritage. I've been doing history projects all over this town. I understand how much we have here and how much we need to protect as we grow. And I will make sure that we do not sacrifice the ability of people to stay in the neighborhoods they grew up in while we grow. So I'm excited about talking about these issues today. I'm excited about being your mayor and serving to make sure that everyone's voice is heard. I've been riding a different bus route every week to talk with people and find out what they want, and I'm going to continue doing that as mayor. We're going to work together, and we're going to get these things done. Thank you for being here today. I'd be honored to have your vote.
Thank you all for coming today, and thanks for the organizers of this great event. I'm Randy Dorman, and I'm running for mayor of Tucson because I think Tucson has limitless potential. And I'm frustrated that we settle for the status quo, we're reactive instead of proactive about creating opportunities for ourselves and our kids, and ultimately for their kids. I moved here in 2001 from New York right into downtown Tucson. My husband's native, and we fell in love with downtown and really saw what it could be. A couple of months later, we bought an old ice factory on the edge of downtown and turned it into the Ice House Lofts. And that project was years ahead of downtown revitalization, but it showed people what was possible. And that's what we have to continue to do for Tucson. I have a 15-year-old daughter, and I want her to be able to be proud of the projects that we do, and part of the way that we do that is by always starting to work with the neighborhoods, and by creating projects that always enhance the neighborhoods, by working with them so closely, over and over. I have three main pillars to why I'm running, and the first is to really grow this economy and create more and better paying jobs. The second is to really balance our growth with maintaining our character and culture. And the third is to protect our environment. We have the opportunity to learn from other cities, but we really have to be proactive. There were articles on gentrification in 2015. And it's only 4 years later that the mayor and council is really taking that seriously, and we're all here today. In September, I was part of the gentrification forum that was here. I didn't even know I was running for mayor then, but I was really concerned about how we tackle this issue of balance. And I was the only developer. It's an very important issue. And I'm the only candidate who has had a real plan regarding displacement since I started running, and also on my website available for people to review, because that's how important an issue it is. Regarding the ideas that were submitted from the coalition, I would support most of them. They were really good. But I also have some of my own ideas, including making sure to have a person or a program to connect homeowners to the programs here that already exist, like property tax caps, senior, widow, and disabled tax exemptions that already exist, but most people don't know about them. Connecting people to the Healthy Homes and Home Access Program and the Pathway to Purchase Program for down payment assistance. We can expand the GPLET. We should look at a city TIF and also look at the federal opportunity zones, which is a new federal program so that we can finance low-income and affordable housing. We should also look at creating a legacy business program to protect those businesses that have been here for 30 years and have some historic significance or contribute to the neighborhoods. San Francisco has done that with great success, and I'd support the community benefits agreement as well. Heading into the next 4 years, it's critical that we have a mayor with actual experience in development so that we can move forward in a productive way. We've never had a mayor with 20 years of development experience before, and the experience of working with neighborhoods on projects that enhance. I commit to you to be a proactive, transparent, and committed partner in moving Tucson forward and balancing with our neighborhoods. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you all. I have been asked by several of you, why is Ed Ackerley, who's also running for mayor, not up there? And that's basically because he doesn't have a primary. And so, Ed, if you would stand up and we'll let people know who you are. We're not ignoring him. We have gotten so many questions here, and there's no way we're going to get around to all of the questions, but one of the things is on development. And I have had 3 different folks ask for you specifically, Randy, about developments such as the Ice House that may have put people on the street purchasing property. And is that not part of the problem, that you create housing that is not affordable for people in low-income situations?
So the Ice House we purchased in 2002 when there was almost nothing going on downtown, in a neighborhood on the edge of downtown next to the train tracks that was primarily industrial with just a little bit of residential and a lot of abandoned homes that were in disrepair. We started by speaking with that neighborhood to tell them about our plans, and the neighbors that we had in 2002 are the very same neighbors that we have there today. And we did 3 projects in that neighborhood. The Ice House, the Ice House was for sale and it would have been torn down and turned into who knows what. We rehabilitated this building that was from the 1920s. It was the fabric of that neighborhood, and people come up to me all the time to talk about how they had gotten ice there in the past. So we really made that building relevant for generations to come, and we were very careful to work with the neighborhoods specifically and embrace the neighborhoods, embrace the neighbors. It really is about balance. No one for those 3 projects were displaced because the properties that we were buying were not in use, abandoned, or really in such terrible disrepair. The neighborhood was declining. There were drug dealers and Satan worshipers who used to leave us messages as we were developing, but we're really proud that that neighborhood was strengthened and those neighbors still exist. We have to really be careful because that is not always the case, and developers do not always start by speaking with the neighbors. Our developments, we always do, we focus on sustainability and neighborhood enhancement, and I am going to demand that from the developers when I'm mayor.
Thank you. Steve, again, the question is about developers displacing people and creating an area where there isn't affordable housing.
Right, and this is a major crisis. We're the 4th worst state in the country in terms of affordable housing, is what a recent study came out to talk about that, and it's really affecting people where they live. We should assure, an easy step to do this is that if the city approves any rezonings or puts any city incentives into a project, they must require a certain minimum percentage of affordable housing units be built as part of that project. We've got to increase the amount of affordable housing in our community. And I think if we look at incentivizing affordable housing projects entirely, that's somewhere we need to go also. One of the problems we have in our community in a lot of areas throughout the city is big box stores are closing down because we're now getting big boxes delivered to our porches through Amazon instead of going to the big box stores. So these are at risk of becoming a part of a blight to a neighborhood. If we can incentivize ways of building mixed-use developments with affordable housing, childcare, business incubators, restaurants, all in places where people live and can afford to live, and tie them together with better public transit to be able to get people high-capacity transit lines connecting all these urban centers. Then we're creating a city that not only has more affordable housing, it also is more sustainable in a time of climate change. So we're burning less carbon is getting around, or being able to stay in the community where we're at, while strengthening the neighborhoods that are at risk of becoming blight because of these dead big box stores at the end of them. So a lot of these things people can help in doing that, but certainly any project that gets approval by the city for rezonings or has any kind of incentive has to meet certain affordable housing requirements that we will set to make sure that people can afford to live in this city. It doesn't matter if we all rise unless we rise together.
I'm not new to the issue of affordable housing. As a matter of fact, I was a student activist when Pima County went out to get neighborhood reinvestment and affordable housing reinvestment bonds. I walked door to door for that issue. And so I am a big fan. I worked with Pima County Neighborhood Reinvestment side by side with a housing reinvestment staff. And so I've always understood the importance of affordability and planning for it. I too was at the town hall that was put together by the Barrio Neighborhood Coalition on gentrification in September. And I wanted to listen. I don't think I said one word that day, maybe I did. But I wanted to listen, and I've been listening. And as your council member, being on our council for 12 years, I've been a champion for affordable housing. At many times being attacked by developers because I was requesting affordability and planning for affordability. I worked with Gadsden Development Company and the community and Menlo Park and different stakeholders to make sure that we plan for affordability in that development. And so I will make sure that we continue working with the Barrio Neighborhood Coalition in every neighborhood in this city to make sure that we are working for either to continue passing affordable housing bonds, making sure that we are working with community development block grants, with all of the federal housing programs that we have to work on this displacement issue. It's very important, and we've got to work together, not just the neighborhoods and the city on the side, but all of us with Pima County Housing Department, with the city of South Tucson, where we're seeing all of this displacement happening. And so I'm ready to go, and I am knowledgeable and have the experience to be able to lead us from day one on this issue.
Thank you, Rachel. Another question here. The current affordable housing, I've gotten real comfortable here now, huh? The current affordable housing policies of the city are not working, in part because of the rising construction forces that are coming into Tucson, and also the rising price of homes. What will you do to make sure people are not priced out of the market? Is there anything that you as a mayor would lead on? Regina, we'll go with you first.
Well, just Tuesday, based on the input and the feedback of the Barrio Neighborhood Coalition, the Austin displacement study, we created, and I led on creating an anti-displacement task force that works with the community and with local jurisdictions to make sure that we find solutions. And it's not just creating a task force for the sake of it. We requested that they work with the community, make sure that they bring us solutions in the first quarter of next year. And so we've got to make sure that we step it up, right? To be honest with you, I think that our Housing and Community Development Department has not done a good job. And we just passed a budget, and we passed the budget with money specifically for anti-gentrification and displacement issues. We are going to redirect emergency service grants and CDBG, Community Development Block Grants, specifically to address anti-displacement and gentrification. And so we've already started the process based on listening to you, the community, but we need to make sure that we're stepping up, that we're taking a look at all of the options available that other cities in this country use, that we can bring to the city of Tucson, and have a person that has the vision and the experience to make it happen.
One of the other problems we have in Tucson is that we have a lot of investors coming in from out of state, in some cases out of country, to be able to buy properties throughout our neighborhoods and then flip them for a profit, and that increases the overall housing costs. That's a major issue here. Sometimes people are buying them to invest and have them as an Airbnb. Some people are using them as student housing. Some people are just flipping them. That's a major issue all over the country, but especially right here in Pima County. We're one of the higher places in the country. We've got to get on top of that issue. And that's one of the things I worked on in the legislature. I actually had a bill that I brought up because I found out, to my shock, that the Department of Revenue does not collect income taxes already owed by out-of-state or out-of-country investors when they sell property in the state of Arizona. And that absolutely shocked me. So I introduced a bill to make that an escrow item. That profit would have to be reported to the Department of Revenue, and they would have to have the money taken out at escrow. And if they wanted it back, they would have to be forced to file an income tax form in the state of Arizona. That was estimated to bring between $8 and $10 million a year into our coffers, and I designated that to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund to build more affordable housing in the state of Arizona. That's the sort of thing we need to do to make sure we crack down on people who are taking advantage of our community, basically taking out our resources of affordable housing, taking them out of our control and making profits off of, and taking their profits out of state. That can't happen. I will continue to push that at the legislature, using my knowledge, the process in the legislature, to be able to continue pushing that forward. Actually, this year I was not in the legislature for the first time in 12 years, and I found a colleague who was pushing that bill for me. It got close. The bill didn't go through, but it converted into a $15 million increase into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund this year alone. So I'm going to be able to use my knowledge of the legislature to actually push things forward, as well as defend against the constant attacks they do against us.
It's not enough to just say you want to make more affordable housing or force developers to provide affordable housing. You really have to understand how development works so that you can create the programs that are actually going to make a difference. Right now, construction costs are high. And so if you don't have a project that's large enough, it's going to be very difficult to be able to finance that project with affordable units in it without a funding source. Almost all affordable housing has a funding source, and that's the reality. No matter how much we want more, it really depends on finding those funding sources. So we've had some great federal funding sources in the past, and the reason that you see some of the low-income and affordable housing downtown is because they were given extra credit to be near a streetcar. Downtown, there's about six of the 18 projects, but that's gone now. So the ways that we can do it, and what I've been proposing, is there's a G-plet downtown, but the G-plet could be expanded, and in the expansion areas, we could designate that those funds go towards affordable, low-income workforce housing. Our TIF is state enabled, and there are very specific requirements, Rio Nuevo. But we could create a city TIF in an additional area and use those funds to be directed towards affordable housing. There's a new federal program called Opportunity Zones, and all of the areas around downtown are in those opportunity zones, and those funds could be directed towards affordable housing. We all have that goal, but it's important that we have leadership that understands what it takes to actually make that happen. Thanks.
Thank you, Randy. As with Ward 1 candidates, we have a ton of questions on El Rio Golf Course. And it comes down to, if you are elected, will you keep the El Rio Golf Course from being sold or pieced off to developers? If you think it's a good idea to sell it, say why. Regina, we'll start with you.
Thank you, absolutely. I will listen to the community just like I've done before when it comes to the topic of El Rio Golf Course and community space in Ward 1. So I think that the conversation about El Rio has to be had with the community. To be honest with you, I appreciate this question because there's been a lot of misinformation on El Rio and Grand Canyon University. And we have to go back to the context of the time that we were living in, right? The city of Tucson was losing millions of dollars. We were in an economic recession. And we, as a council member that was getting the advice and the feedback from the city manager to close pools, to close neighborhood centers like El Rio, senior centers, I had to make sure that I gave the vote to consider Grand Canyon at El Rio a good thought. I had to consider it. But after the input and feedback from the community, and with conversations with the community, I realized that that is not what the community wanted. Golf at this time was bleeding $1.5 million a year when it should be an enterprise zone and pay for itself. And so we had to find solutions, not bringing up the fees for Kidco at 350% or closing pool. We're just barely recovering. And so my original intent, to be honest with you, is to open up, bring down the fences of El Rio Golf Course and open it up and make it a community park. So I considered it. I think Grand Canyon played the city of Tucson, used us as leverage to get better deals from Mesa, and to this day, Grand Canyon hasn't built in Mesa. So no, I am not going to consider anything without listening to the community.
As I said earlier, Sal Valdenegro Sr. and the heroes of the desegregation fight made El Rio Golf Course sacred ground. I will not sell it to anyone who's an outsider. And furthermore, I want to make sure that the management of the El Rio complex is completely managed by those who were the heroes and everyone who is in the neighborhood right here. This cannot be something that is offered up as a deal for anything else. This is sacred ground, not just in the west side, but in the entire city.
One of my great pleasures in running for mayor is meeting people in the community, knocking on doors, and going into neighborhoods and finding out what's important to them. So I had the great pleasure of meeting with members of this community, this neighborhood, and really learning about the history, the importance, how deeply rooted the past of El Rio is with the present. I would never, as mayor, commit a resource that belongs to a neighborhood without discussing it with the neighborhood. I would never presume to understand what's important to the neighborhood without having deep conversations, repeated conversations. So if that's not what the neighborhood wants, that's not what I would do as mayor, but I would go to the neighborhood first.
question that has been raised several times. It's in Spanish, so let me translate it. When people are displaced, especially older people, and especially those with mental health issues, they lose their home, their whole life falls apart. What can be done to help those people who have mental health issues after they lose their home and keep them from becoming, homeless and on the street?
Well, I think it's very important that we use the resources that we have as a community, right? The city of Tucson has community development block grants. We use them to make sure that people have affordable housing. But when in cases of having the elderly, we have organizations like the Pima Council on Aging. We have organizations that like the Southwest Fair Housing Council that offers these resources. We also have an organization, an older organization, that Southern Arizona Legal Aid, and a new one that offers legal services to tenants and homeowners. And it's called Step Up to Justice. It's housed right here on the Westside, and we have to coalesce. I think what the city of Tucson must do better, and I will lead on this when I'm the next mayor, is that we have not done a good enough job to put all of the resources that are available in one place, whether it's one pager or a jump drive or on a website. The Housing Community Development Department has not worked well with Pima County Housing Center, has not worked well with nonprofit organizations that deliver critical services to the community. So I will make sure that we have either the department director, that's the new department director with Housing Community Development, or the deputy director be personally responsible for anti-displacement strategies for the city of Tucson. They will be personally responsible, not a coordinator, the department director. And so we have to give these issues the importance they deserve, and I've been advocating for that for the past 12 years, and we finally have an opportunity to hire a housing community development director that actually cares about affordability and gentrification.
I don't know how many of you have been down to the Center of Opportunity on the old Holiday Inn on Palo Verde, just north of I-10. It's dealing with the homeless, people suffering from homelessness. It is an amazing facility where there are 350 beds, where people who are suffering from homelessness come in there, they get triaged, whether they have behavioral health or addiction issues. They're given an opportunity to have health care, dental care, they get job training, they get job placement, and it's an attempt where you've got the city, the state, the county, and a lot of nonprofit and faith-based communities working together to solve this key community problem. Why don't we use that same sort of ability to collaborate amongst all these different resources in the community to be able to stop people from becoming homeless in the first place? When people are at risk of becoming homeless, we need to make sure that social workers are accessing them. That we have in every council office the ability for people to come and say, look, I'm about to be evicted. I'm about to lose my home, I'm about to be foreclosed upon, and find out ways to be plugged into those systems, and then create a system where people can stop being homeless in the first place. Because if you don't have a behavioral health issue, losing your home is enough to give you one. And we can do this through prevention and make that happen. I have no doubt that we can do this together. There's so many great resources in this community and so many people with such big hearts who are going out there and solving the problems where they happen, that we can make this happen ourselves. And furthermore, one of those suggestions that was on the list originally, I really liked the idea about having a way of having people getting legal representation when they're facing eviction. If people are entitled to a public defender when they're under a criminal charge, when they're simply suffering from the crime of being evicted, shouldn't they at least have that same sort of representation?
I agree. The first priority has to be to keep people in their homes. And there are existing programs to help. We've mentioned some of them already. In addition, the mayor has the great honor of being able to be the convener of the nonprofits in the community who are working so hard to provide services to help keep people in their homes, to help people with mental distress. And as mayor, I would make sure that we have a big convening of the nonprofits so that we have a great understanding of what they can do and how we can direct those services to keep people in their homes. Now, once people have to leave their homes, there's so much that we can do. In addition to the Center of Opportunity, we had a great program in downtown Tucson where we were experiencing, a lot of people experiencing homeless in the park outside the library. And instead of trying to shift people or just have them move away, we established a compassion first, enforcement second policy because there's so many reasons that people lose their homes and become displaced. We partnered with Old Pueblo Community Services, and they are a housing first model. So instead of saying you have to be sober, you can't have a partner, you can't have a dog, and you can get a home, and then you're surrounded with services. In 3 months of sitting in the park with Old Pueblo Community Services, 5 days a week, we found 85 people, permanent or temporary housing. And in 4 months, we had reduced chronic homelessness downtown by 95%. And that is a great example of bringing together the services that exist with the people who need those. And I plan to be the chief convener to make sure that that happens in the city.
Going along with that whole idea, many questions have come in about developers and the tax breaks that they get. And some folks want to know, if Tucson's so great, why do we have to give them so many damn tax breaks? And can't some of those, the money that comes from those tax breaks be put directly into affordable housing? I think I got it right, with a little bit of personal input there. Not much.
So it's a great question, and so I'm going to explain the dynamics of it, because I've been involved in a project that got a G-Plet. None of our other projects had, but we need those incentives to incentivize development where we want it to happen. Because right now, construction prices are high. And although our rents seem high, they're not high enough to actually make projects workable, viable, financeable. If you want a big project, and I've done mostly smaller projects, you have to get other investors involved. And they'll only be involved if they can get a certain return so that it's worth their risk. Otherwise, those projects don't happen. And I will tell you that most of the projects downtown, whether you like them or not, they would not have happened without the G-Plet. They just don't pencil out. And after this session, I'm happy to speak in depth with anybody more about that issue. But that's just the truth. We're trying to do a housing project right now. Without the G-Plet, we won't be able to do it. And that is just the reality. But the G-Plet is supposed to finance the kind of projects we want, where we want them. And we have the means to direct that, the types of projects and where we want them. And we have the ability to expand the G-Plet and have it be directed towards other kinds of developments, like more affordable housing. So that is why. And downtown had been a drain on the community. Businesses and people were leaving. So that investment was necessary, but we have to really balance that with other types of development that we want to.
Steve, maybe you can explain what a G-plat is for people in the audience.
Government property lease excise tax, G-plat. When it comes to any type, it's one of the series of incentives to developers to be able to build things. But in the legislature, I have demanded that if any of these types of incentives are used, there needs to be a demonstration that if this is going to get much more than the money put into it by public funds in return. And if it doesn't deliver, we have to claw back that money from the people who get the incentives. If an incentive is going after to try to create a certain number of jobs at a certain wage, and then they don't deliver those jobs at a certain wage within a specific specified time frame, we have to take the money back. That's the only way that should work. Too often that hasn't worked that way, and it's simply been a little sweetener to get people in to get that done, and that cannot happen. If we're going to put public funding into a development project in Tucson, we need to make sure it meets minimum affordability standards for a minimum percentage of units that they're building. And I also believe that we should also require good union labor with union standards of quality and union wages.
You saw Paul Stapleton Smith there, huh? Hi, welcome, Paul. You know, when the G-plats were instituted in the city of Tucson, we were in a massive economic recession like we had never seen since the Great Depression. And so when I led on an economic recovery plan for Tucson's future, I asked for the concept of a primary jobs incentive, so that where we could create an incentive for companies that are growing within the city of Tucson or coming to Tucson, that they create at least 35 high-wage, long-term jobs with 75% of their wages paid for, and the construction sales taxes of when they spend more than $5 million in the community, they go back to public purposes. G-plat was one of the tools that we created in the city of Tucson. What I believe in, when these incentives were created, that we were losing $50 million a year, seeing jobs lost, thousands of jobs lost in our community, it was a different time. Now, we have used a community benefits agreement like the one with the historic 4th Avenue Coalition that they put together. Now we have to start demanding back from those incentives and making sure that when we're building density in transportation-oriented developments, that we demand, like the historic 4th Avenue Coalition did, that the developer provide transit passes for all of their residents, that we do provide that we do ask for the developer to use skilled labor and pitch into apprenticeship programs, that we do make sure that they put aside money for affordable housing. Now, when we are in the best economic space that we have been, now is when we have to make sure that we demand these things. And I'll do that as your mayor.
This question kind of goes along with that, Rowena. If we're in such a great economic place right now, why don't we have the police and fire that we need for a growing city? Tucson has grown, continued to grow, but the police department has decreased over the years. Maybe, Steve, we can start with you. What can be done about that? And it's now a public safety issue.
We have 30% fewer commissioned officers on the street than we did in 2005. So the response times when people call when they're in need are much higher than they ought to be, and sometimes they don't respond at all when there's burglaries. That's not the way it should be. Public safety is one of the basics we need to do, along with filling our potholes and making sure that our parks are in good working order. We have to prioritize that. There are ways we can get it done. One of the ways that I think we can do long-term to make sure that all of those priorities are sustainably funded in the future is to stop this loophole whereby we lose $70 million a year that should be going to the city of Tucson that ends up staying in Phoenix in state share revenues. And that happens because we have a large unincorporated area in Pima County, larger than almost any other county. And that the way the law goes is the state share revenues only goes to incorporated areas. So if we're able to embark on an aggressive annexation in the unincorporated areas, bring these people into the city, we'll be able to get not just that 70 million in additional revenues that can be spent on public safety, parks, and street preservation, but we also are able to get the sales taxes coming from places like the Encantada to be able to increase the amount of revenues, and we all benefit together. If we're a bigger metro area, we have a bigger economy, and we don't have have-nots and haves in separate parts of separate jurisdictions.
So our economy is not doing that well. That's why we're in this situation. According to Eller, last year, our job growth was 1.2%. That was far behind Phoenix, the state, and the country. We have 18% poverty rate. So our economy is not doing nearly as well as it should be. That's why in my plan, I'm prioritizing economic development and jobs. And if you go to my website, I have a full plan on jobs in the economy that goes well beyond just annexation. We have to revamp our whole economic development department so that it is the place for local businesses, small and medium, and our startups to go to get all kinds of help on best practices for attracting and retaining employees, for small business loans, for IT and social media help, for it to be a location where they can find employees and employees can find jobs. We also need to create ecosystems of industry here so that people can come here for a career and that our residents here can have a career and not just a job. We need to focus on attracting the right kinds of new businesses here. I've been a businesswoman for 30 years and I've worked all around the world. When we're trying to attract businesses, who do you want speaking to those companies? You want somebody who already knows what they're looking for and how to protect Tucson so that they become additive to our community. And then regional collaboration is important in so many ways. When the county and the city act like silos, not only is it counterproductive, but it costs us money. I've spoken with Mike Ortega and with Chuck Huckleberry about creating efficiencies in parks and planning and development services and more. There is a lot of ways that we can put more money into our economy, and we need to start doing that now.
So the question was about public safety. And it's important that it was about public safety. And so we have been prioritizing public safety. Public safety consists, 60% of our budget consists and is for funding for public safety. And so we have been prioritizing it. And what we need to do though is what we've been doing recently, right? We went out as a community with the mayor and my colleagues on the council. We went out for Prop 101. Thanks to the voters of Tucson, we passed it. More than $150 million invested in first responders, on ambulances, on vehicles, on new stations, fire stations, and police stations throughout our community. And that's thanks to you. What we did with our budget, because we're finally being able to see good revenue come in the city of Tucson. We took police and we took fire and we invested. We gave an across-the-board 2.5% increase, and we gave them $3.2 million to each department to make sure that we raise the wages of police and firefighters to comparable levels to valley cities. Now that we've done that, we're going to do the same thing with the blue-collar workers. I've led on pushing for our city blue-collar workers to make a minimum wage of $15 an hour. So we're gonna do it. And so now what we need to do do, now that we're retaining our police officers, our next budget is including 25 additional police officers and 10 additional park rangers, which is a community service officer. We need to continue pushing every budget and making sure that we're hiring police officers and firefighters to make sure that we're providing the first response services that you deserve.
Thank you. So that we have enough time to give each one of you a couple of minutes to wrap up, this final question has been asked across the board, and it's more of a social moral question, and it has to do with the sanctuary city issue. Could each one of you just give us 30 seconds on, do you favor a sanctuary city designation? Tell us why. If you don't, tell us why. Steve, let's start with you.
I do not favor the Sanctuary City initiative. I've worked with refugees very, very deeply. I've been over to working with the asylum seekers. I've been standing up for the rights of migrants. I believe the city of Tucson is doing a pretty good job at TPD at being able to make people feel that they're not afraid when they need help. If this becomes a major issue and a major battle, it could potentially put at risk the very people that we're trying to protect. Those asylum seekers, refugees, and migrants who are coming here to try to be just left alone to create a better life for themselves.
Brandy?
I'm in a similar place. I value that we're an immigrant welcoming community. I want us to continue that, and I want us to continue the work that's been done with TPD in response to SB 1070 in their policies, both in 2012, their update in 2017. But the initiative, unfortunately, has consequences, financial consequences to the city that are deep, and I think are too deep for us to take on, and so I can't support that initiative, but I do support working with TPD to get closer from the initiative to where their policies are now.
Thank you. Kahina?
This is an issue that is close to my heart, and I have led on the council on immigrant rights issues. As a matter of fact, I've worked for 25 years and that on this particular issue, and that's why I've garnered the endorsement of the grandfather of the sanctuary movement, Reverend John Fife, Isabel Garcia, Margot Cohen, so many community leaders that know my heart of hearts on this. I led the city council on being the first city in Arizona to push back and take a stand against SB 1070. I led on the council to take a no border wall stance, a resolution against the border wall with our brothers and sisters in the Tohono Nation and the Pascuayaqui tribe, along with Pima County. And that no border wall resolution has teeth because we are divesting from companies that build the border wall. I've led on these issues and I care about these issues, and I feel very conflicted that I cannot support this initiative as written. I cannot. Because the state of Arizona, the state legislature and the governor have been trying to micromanage the city of Tucson for years, for more than 12 years. They have been doing this. And so we've got to make sure, because they're threatening to take our state shared revenue is $130 million or more.
Thank you, Renee.
If we lose that money, we can lose very important services in our community.
Thank you. Before we come to the end of this program, the organizers have surveys in the back that they would really appreciate you filling out a real quick survey so they know if this has worked or how they can make it better. They want to thank everybody for coming, and for the last part of this, we're going to give each one of you 2 minutes, starting with Randy and working back this way, to tell us why this organization or this group here should vote for you.
Thank you again for being here today. I am not a career politician. I have wanted to be mayor of Tucson to have positive impact in this community. And it would be easy for me to stand here and shout political buzzwords to get claps. But what I've done today is be honest and transparent about what I know regarding the issues that we're trying to solve. And it's important that our leadership actually understand how to move Tucson forward. Tucson is on the cusp of a renaissance. When you think about the people, the startup community, the culture, our environment, we have all the makings of an incredible city moving forward into the future. I want that future for us. I want us to be a thriving 21st century city that is rooted in our culture and our heritage. I've worked on downtown revitalization, and now I want to make sure that we find the opportunities throughout the city. There is so much that we can do if we start to think differently about what's possible here. I ask for the honor of serving as your mayor, and I appreciate you being here. I hope you will join me on this journey. Thank you.
The reason I'm running for mayor is you. Your dedication, your passion, your heart to be able to help this community become a better place for everyone. It's an absolute privilege to even be considered to be your mayor and help you get that accomplished. I have a track record of being able to get stuff done. In the legislature for 12 years, 6 years in the House, 6 years in the Senate, I was able to work on some solutions to some of our most difficult issues. When President Obama's Affordable Care Act came to Arizona, nobody thought we would ever be able to be a part of it. But I was one of the key leaders that enabled us to expand Medicaid health care to 400,000 people throughout Arizona, saving lives and keeping our hospitals afloat. We got it done even though nobody thought we could do it. And last year during Red for Ed, I had been fighting for 11 previous years, railing to empty galleries, high on Dr. Pepper in the middle of the night, talking about these education cuts they've done and how they've devastated our state and our city here in particular. But when Red for Ed came, I was able to help leverage that power, that movement. 70,000 teachers on the Capitol. I gave them the information they needed to be powerful, and I helped leverage that power to move Doug Ducey off of a last and best offer of $30 million in new funding for education to a budget of $415 million of new money this year alone. That's significant. Education is something we have to move forward to and act on as the city. If the state's gonna punt, we have to take care of ourselves. Because if we don't fund education, if we don't provide a great educational start for all of our kids, we're gonna pay for it in the long run as a city anyway. So we've gotta come on in the breach. I am so excited about what we can do together. With your passion and my ability to set the goals and bring coalitions together, there's nothing we can't do as we move forward and thrive, not merely survive in this 21st century.
You know, 27 years ago, when I arrived as a 17-year-old in Tucson, don't do the math, I would have never imagined that I would be here in front of you, my community, asking to be your next mayor. First generation college-bound Chicana, daughter of immigrants, first to graduate from college, first to vote in my family, never would have thought. But I've rallied and picketed and organized and marched with many of you in this room. And I am not a career politician. I am a public servant. And I chose that. I could have chosen to be a broadcaster. I could have chosen to be a business person. I chose to serve my community because this is my passion, my community. And so I am here in front of you today, the person that has 12 years of experience and has a vision for where we move together and co-govern. That we invest in a climate action plan because we have to have a livable community for future generations. We have to make sure that we preserve our natural resources, that we invest in small businesses and workforce training, that we invest in quality of life issues that make your family's quality of life better, like investing in transit, investing in our roads and our parks, in our first responders. I am here asking you to be your next mayor because I am passionate about our nature, our history, and our culture. And we should not judge ourselves by how many developments we build. We should judge ourselves of how we preserve the beauty of who we are and the natural resources, our nature, our history, our culture. That's what makes us unique. Thank you, and I ask for your vote.
Thanks to all of you, thanks to the volunteers, and these two young ladies up here have done a phenomenal job. They're from the Tucson Land Justice Collective, and they are volunteers like everybody else. Please drive carefully and don't forget to vote.
Pictures that people brought in, some of those elders during that